Hi, thanks for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell, and today I'm going to continue these talks about Plato's Republic. As you can see, we're up to book 6 now, and we're going to talk about the divided line today. Maybe some of you are only here for the divided line and you haven't seen any of the videos that are earlier in the series. I do invite you to watch those because I do approach the Republic quite differently from what you might get in academia. So I will leave a link for that up above. But what we're going to look at today is just book 6, and we're going to see that the dialogue really takes a turn from this point. So there are 10 books total in the Republic. So now we are entering the second half of the Republic. What we saw in the first half was really a focus on this analogy of the city-state to the soul. Basically, Socrates completed that, or at least he completed his reasons for making that analogy in the first place. And so he's able to more or less leave it behind. It runs throughout the dialogue, but it's not going to be the focus the way it was earlier in the dialogue. So just briefly, remember in book 1, they started talking a little bit about justice, and it ended with Socrates saying that they haven't yet determined what justice is in itself. And that led them into the challenge he was given in book 2 to show what justice is and why it would be of value in and of itself, even if society doesn't recognize a person as being just. And so Socrates created this analogy saying, let's look at a city-state, and that will help us understand what the soul is if we are comparing the two. And so everything he says about the city-state, we apply it to the soul, and we start to get a sense of the way he understands soul. And then that led us into the education of the soul, what he called music, which was like that purification stage, understanding your states of mind. And then also what he called gymnastics was that building of spiritual energy that you use in coordination with the earlier study of music. It also led us into the virtues, and he talked about how he understood wisdom and courage and temperance, and then eventually he got to justice, and he showed us what justice is in and of itself. It is that proper ordering within the soul. It is a healthy soul, and so being healthy, you can see it has value in and of itself, and so he made his case. And then in book 5, he showed us, after showing us what virtue is, he wants to show us how it functions. And he showed us how it functions in the individual, and also how the person with a healthy soul will function in the world. And that peaked with the philosopher king, the idea of acting in the world from a place of wisdom. So that wraps up where we are up to now. And so now he has completed his need for that analogy. And so now he can move away from it to some degree. And we're going to see that here in book 6. So the first part, he goes on a little bit more about the philosopher, carrying on what he said about the philosopher king. And I think that those of us who enjoy philosophy will appreciate what he says about philosophers. I'm going to show you a little bit of that. And then the last half of book 6 really goes into metaphysics. And that leads us into what academia calls the divided line. Okay, so with all of that, let's get into the book 6. So here are some of the things that he says about philosophers. And by the way, all of our translations, as I've been doing throughout these talks on the Republic, are from Paul Shorey. So he says that philosophers are those who are capable of apprehending that which is eternal and unchanging. Now, even though this part is not a focus on metaphysics, it really does help to have at least a basic idea of Platonic metaphysics in your back pocket to understand what he's saying. And the better you know metaphysics, the more comfortable you are with it, the more you're going to get out of this section. So that which is eternal and unchanging, that's the realm of things in themselves. That, for Socrates, is absolute reality. Our physical world obviously has a mode of reality. Here we are, but it is not ultimate reality. And so some people can really only focus on the physical world. They're not capable of understanding things in themselves. It's too vague for them, too abstract. But philosophers are those who are capable of apprehending that world. Excuse me. Sorry, throat's a little dry here. Okay, and then he also says that philosophers are those who, as painters look to their models, they fix their eyes on the absolute truth, again, things in themselves, and always with reference to that ideal, and in the exactest possible contemplation of it, they establish in this world also the laws of the beautiful, the just, and the good. I think this is going to be a long video. All right, so what is important here is to see that the philosophers are always focused on that world. That's absolute reality. This is a copy or imitation of it, if you will. Not imitation in the sense of being fake, but it's a imitation in the sense of being a lesser progression. As reality progresses down through the realms, it becomes, there's less power, less unity. Each realm, though, is a copy of sorts of that which is above. And so if we're looking to that as our ideal, if that is the model that we're holding in our soul, and then what we're establishing here are laws of the beautiful, the just, and the good, then what this implies is that when we are looking to that world of absolute realities or things in themselves, what we're seeing there is beauty itself, justice itself, and good itself. He also tells us that philosophers are those who know that ideal reality of things and who do not fall short of the others in experience and are not second to them in any part of virtue. So again, knowing those things, also not falling short in experience. Well, that means that your knowledge of them, your experience of things in themselves is not so fleeting that it's just kind of vague, but you have a deep enough experience to know it well, to be comfortable in that world. And you're not second to others in any part of virtue. So that healthy state of soul, that healthy condition of soul that was described in Book 4. Now, there are many interesting things and enjoyable things that he says about the philosopher here. I do encourage you all to read it. I'm sure maybe some of you are probably just following the videos and not actually reading. That's fine. I still appreciate you coming here. I'm glad that you have enough interest in the Republic to watch these videos. You will get more out of it, though, if you read it yourself. And if you only read 1 or 2 books, I think book 6 would be one of them to read. Book 7 also is where you get the allegory of the cave. I think most people want to read that one because it's the most famous part. But what he says here, I want to talk about this for a minute here. There is a lot that I'm skipping over because it would take too long to cover everything. So I'm giving you just a flavor of it. But this is a really interesting section right here, so I want to give this one to you. He says, the most surprising fact of all is that each of the gifts of nature that we praise tends to corrupt the soul of its possessor and divert it from philosophy. I'm speaking of bravery, sobriety, and the entire list. So here he's talking about the virtues, but he also includes in the list here things like good memory or quick mind, that sort of thing. So being intelligent and also brave and so on. He says these qualities in the soul that we praise are also the very things that can corrupt us. And at first it may not seem obvious, but once he points out his reason, it is a very interesting idea here. And I'll give you his conclusion to give you a sense of where it goes. He says, shall we not similarly affirm that the best endowed souls become worse than the others under a bad education? Or do you suppose that great crimes and unmixed wickedness spring from a slight nature, and not from a vigorous one corrupted by its nurture, while a weak nature will never be the cause of anything great, either for good or evil. So there is a nature versus nurture argument, that if you have the nature of someone who is quick-witted and has many positive qualities, you're also the kind of person who, with the wrong education, is open to great corruption, great crimes, and unmixed wickedness, as he describes it. So interesting argument there. Here's another one that I think is worth mentioning here. He's talking here about why following the multitude is not wise, why it's actually an act of madness, even though this is the way to fit in the way most people live. And I think you'll find that his argument here is really quite poignant for our current social and political situation. And in some ways, I find it a little depressing, honestly, that this was written some 2,400 years ago, and humanity on the whole has not really learned anything. We're in the same place. So here's what he describes. Each of these private teachers who work for pay, whom the politicians call sophists and regard as their rivals, inculcates nothing else than these opinions of the multitude which they opine when they are assembled, and they call this knowledge wisdom. And now here's his description. It is as if a man were acquiring the knowledge of the humors and desires of a great strong beast which he had in his keeping, how it is to be approached and touched, and when and by what things it is made most savage or gentle, yes, and the several sounds it is wont to utter on the occasion of each, and again, what sounds uttered by another make it tame or fierce. And after mastering this knowledge by living with the creature and by lapse of time, should call it wisdom, and should construct thereof a system in art, and turn to the teaching of that art, knowing nothing in reality about which of these opinions and desires is honorable or base, good or evil, just or unjust, but should apply all these terms to the judgments of the great beast, calling the things that pleased it good, and the things that vexed it bad, having no other account to render of them, but should call what is necessary just and honorable, never having observed how great is the real difference between the necessary and the good, and being incapable of explaining it to another. One more screen. Do you suppose that there is any difference between such a one and the man who thinks that it is wisdom to have learned to know the moods and the pleasures of the motley multitude in their assembly, whether about painting or music, or for that matter, politics? For if a man associates with these, and offers and exhibits to them his poetry, or any other product of his craft, or any political service, and grants the mob authority over himself more than is unavoidable, the proverbial necessity of Diomedes will compel him to give the public what it likes. But that what it likes is really good and honorable, have you ever heard an attempted proof of this that is not simply ridiculous? And Adimantus says, no, and I fancy I never shall hear it either. So quite poignant, I believe. All right, well, I'm going to leave that section of the dialogue behind and go on to the second half, the second part of Book 6, where we go into some metaphysics. And here, as you see, he's going to go beyond the virtues. So he showed us the virtues in the soul, but now he's going to go beyond that to the metaphysical causes beyond it. This part does get a bit confusing. I'm going to take it in steps and give you some charts and graphs to help us go through this. But we'll take it step by step. Here's where it starts. Then such a one must go around the longer way, and must labor no less in studies than in the exercises of the body, or else, as we were just saying, he will never come to the end of the greatest study, and that which most properly belongs to him. And now Glaucon has jumped into the conversation. It was Adimantus before. And he says, why are not these things the greatest? But is there still something greater than justice and the other virtues we described? So we're going beyond justice. There is not only something greater, But of these very things we need not merely to contemplate an outline as now, but we must omit nothing of their most exact elaboration. Or would it not be absurd to strain every nerve to attain to the utmost precision and clarity of knowledge about other things of trifling moment, and not to demand the greatest precision for the greatest matters? It would indeed. But do you suppose that anyone will let you go without asking what is the greatest study, and with what you think it is concerned? Well, here's a chunk of Socrates' answer. It was quite long. For you've often heard that the greatest thing to learn is the idea of good, by reference to which just things and all the rest become useful and beneficial. And now I am almost sure you know that this is what I am going to speak of, and to say further that we have no adequate knowledge of it. And if we do not know it, then even if without the knowledge of this we should know all other things never so well, you are aware that it would avail us nothing, just as no possession either is of any avail without the possession of the good. Or do you think there is any profit in possessing everything except that which is good, or in understanding all things else apart from the good, while understanding and knowing nothing that is fair and good? So the first question we have here is, what does he mean by the idea of good? That becomes a little bit clearer as we go on. You are going to have to do some work, though, with this chapter to get a better sense of what he means here. And I'll say that Book 6 is one of those, and actually the whole dialogue is one of those works that you have to keep coming back to again and again. And each time you read it, you see more into it. And the better you understand metaphysics, the more experience you have with it, the more you're going to see with subsequent readings. So I'll give you you'll have some sense of what he means by the end of this video, but it does take work on your part to get that deeper sense. That said, I'm going to show you this flow chart that I have used in some previous videos. What we see here is that our physical world is at the very bottom. What most people consider the real world, Socrates and Plato say, has a mode of reality, but it's not reality itself. For him and for them, reality itself is here, this world of things in themselves, or absolute realities. Academia calls them forms or ideas. The Greek word is eidos. And also, this dialogue is going to introduce another name, the intelligible realm. Our souls are here, and many people recognize this realm as being above our physical world. For Socrates and Plato, there's a realm even above that, the intelligible realm, or the realm that can be known. We saw at the end of Book 5 that for Plato and for Socrates, our soul has within it faculties of opinion and knowledge, and each of those faculties has its own object. And so objects of opinion are opinions. There are objects of opinion and there are objects of knowledge, and they're different things. And so the realm of opinion is here, whereas here we have the realm of knowledge, so things that can be known. And for Plato and for Socrates, only things in this realm are in the realm of knowledge. We loosely use the word knowledge down here to talk about things that we know. We say we know. Facts and scientific facts. But for Socrates, even though we use the word know, technically they're not actually objects of knowledge, they're objects of opinion. Objects of knowledge are only here. Now, as for the idea of good, if you could rank these, and there are some later Platonists who do go into that in some detail, like Proclus, for example. In his commentary on the Parmenides, he goes into some detail about the ranking of the eidos. What Plato is telling us in this dialogue, we'll see in the allegory of the cave. The cave is this realm, these realms here, and there's also a natural realm which comes in between. So there are 3 realms in the cave. You have to go out of the realm to find the world of knowledge. And there's a learning process here as well, going through the different rankings of ideas or forms I like to call them absolute realities, because these are misnomers and they're misleading. They're not forms in the sense of having shape, and they're not ideas in the sense of being concepts, which are the images that match these words. So absolute realities is, I think, more accurate, or things in themselves. And at the very top of that is the idea of good. He says this is the last to be seen, and it's the hardest to see. It is at the very top. He goes on from here. I fancy at any rate that the just and the honorable, if their relation and reference to the good is not known, will not have secured a guardian of much worth in the man thus ignorant. And my surmise is that no one will understand them adequately before he knows this. You surmise well. Before I go on, I want to point out the word guardian. In the analogy of the city-state to the soul, we saw the guardians were that small group of people who protected the city-state from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And here he is, and then we saw in the analogy that the guardians corresponded to the wisdom-loving part of the soul. And that is really how he's using it here. This is maybe the first time he's using the word guardian to refer to the soul, to refer to that way that he was implying guardian in the analogy of the city-state to the soul. The wisdom-loving part of the soul is the guardian of the soul, in the sense that it is what gives us our good counsel and keeps the soul whole and healthy. And he's saying here that the soul will not have secured a very good guardian without the knowledge of this. What is this? The relation and reference to the good. And he goes on to say that our constitution will have its perfect and definitive organization only when such a guardian who knows these things oversees it. Again, there's that double meaning here. Constitution can mean constitution of a state, but also the soul's constitution. And we saw the double meaning of guardian in the city-states and in the soul. So after saying all that, of course his friends, Glaucon and Erymanthus and everyone else, they want to hear more about the good. This is what we need to know. So what does Socrates reply? He says, sorry, I'm not going to talk about that. He says, nay, my beloved, let us dismiss for the time being the nature of the good in itself. For to attain to my present surmise of that seems a pitch above the impulse that wings my flight today. But of what seems to be the offspring of the good, and most nearly made in its likeness, I am willing to speak if you too wish it, and otherwise to let the matter drop. I'm going to come back later in the video to comment again on this idea of not being willing to talk about the good in itself. But for now, we're going to go on to this offspring of the good. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that the idea of the good is equal to the offspring of the good. However, what we're going to find is that that is not the case. And he actually is going to leave it to you to find what is the relationship of these two things. There's a reason he's talking about two different things here, but he doesn't tie it together quite as obviously as it could be. He leaves it for us, the reader, to work through what he wrote, or Plato does, for us to work it out ourselves to figure out that relationship. That'll become more obvious as we go on. But for now, let's talk about this offspring of the good. And he gives us this example. Though vision may be in the eyes, and its possessor may try to use it, and though color be present, yet without the presence of a third thing specifically and naturally adapted to this purpose, you are aware that vision will see nothing, and the colors will remain invisible. What is this thing of which you speak? The thing that you call light. Ah, you say truly. The bond, then, that yokes together visibility and the faculty of sight is more precious by no slight form than that which unites the other pairs, if light is not without honor. It surely is far from being so. So the focus here is visibility and the faculty of sight. Book 5 ended talking about the faculty of opinion and the faculty of knowledge. And also mentioned in that book were the physical senses as faculties in the soul. For Socrates and for Plato, our physical senses are physical in the sense of using the physical body as a vehicle. However, the actual power is in the soul. So we have sight and visibility so far. We're going to be building this up. But so far what we have is sight is that power of seeing, that faculty in the soul. And by visibility, he means the power of being seen. And he says that it has a bond. Things are not visible unless they have light shining on them. They need that bond. Okay, he's going to go on. Which one can you name of the divinities in heaven as the author and cause of this, whose light makes our vision see best, invisible things to be seen? Why, the one that you too and other people mean, for your question evidently refers to the sun. Is not this then the relation of vision, I'm getting tongue-tied today. Is not this then the relation of vision to that divinity? What? Neither vision itself nor its vehicle, which we call the eye, is identical with the sun. Why, no. But it is, I think, the most sun-like of all the instruments of sense, by far the most. And does it not receive the power which it possesses as an influx, as it were, dispensed from the sun? Certainly. Okay, so not a way that we tend to think in modern times, but we can see value in this. The bond, at least the purest bond of light, is sunlight. And he's telling us that the sun is the cause of this bond, or the cause of sunlight. And then he has this strange language that will become clear to us as we go on, that sight is the most sun-like of the senses. This language will become clearer as we go on. But for now, let's wrap up this part with this quote here. Is it not also true that the sun is not vision, yet as being the cause thereof, is beheld by vision itself? That is so. This, then, the sun, you must understand that I meant by the offspring of the good, which the good begot to stand in proportion with itself, as the good is in the intelligible region, to reason and the objects of reason, so is this in the visible world to vision and the objects of vision. Okay, we're going to break this down, but first of all, I want to point out why I put the Greek word nous here. And that's because reason has a wide range of meanings, from the most profound to the most mundane. And so to clear it up so that we can avoid the mundane meaning of reason, I want to use the word nous. And so we have two regions that he's talking about, the intelligible region or intelligible realm, and then our physical realm, the visible world. So here in our analogy, we have the intelligible region, and here we have the physical. And he's saying that as the good is in the intelligible region to nous and the objects of nous, or the absolute realities in that realm, things in themselves, so is this, and this again refers to the sun. So is the sun to vision, before he used the word sight, and I just want to clarify it is the same. So sight or vision, and the objects of vision, or things in our physical world, our visible world. And so we have this analogy now. And now he just told us a bunch of things about the sun, about it being, about sunlight being a bond and all of that. And now he's telling us that the good begot the sun to stand in proportion with itself. Proportion and analogy are the same Greek word, analogia. And so you're going to find that Plato and Socrates loved their analogies. If these two are analogous to each other, that means we can go back to the list we made before and create a new analogy with the good. If the sun is the cause of a bond, then so is the good. However, he leaves it for us to fill in that blank. Now on this side, we have the power of seeing and the power of being seen. On the side of the good, we have the power of knowing and the power of being known. And if you go through the chapter and you think about what he's saying there, think about things that I have said, then you will find that you can fill in these two blanks. And then finally we can see here that just as sight is the most sun-like of the senses, whatever this is the most good-like or boniform of the faculties. Okay, now after all this, he's going to go even further. You are aware that when the eyes are no longer turned upon objects upon whose colors the light of day falls, but that of the dim luminaries of night, their edges blunted, and they appear almost blind, as if pure vision did not dwell in them. Yes, indeed. But when I take it, they are directed upon objects illumined by the sun. They see clearly, and vision appears to reside in these same eyes. Certainly. Apply this comparison to the soul also in this way. When it is firmly fixed on the domain where truth and reality shine resplendent, it apprehends and knows them, and appears to possess reason. But when it inclines to that region which is mingled with darkness, the world of becoming and passing away, it opines only, and its edge is blunted, and it shifts its opinions hither and thither, and again seems as if it lacked reason. Yes, it does. This reality, then, that gives their truth to the objects of knowledge and the power of knowing to the knower, you must say is the idea of good, and you must conceive it as being the cause of knowledge and of truth in so far as known. So the idea of good is the cause of truth and knowledge. It is what gives objects of knowledge their truth, and it's also what gives the power of knowing to the knower. So looking again at our little flow chart, our soul is here. When it is focused downward on our physical world, as most of us tend to focus, it opines only. But when it looks upward, then it sees more clearly. So here it is acting from that faculty of knowledge, and the idea of good at the peak of this world. The idea of good is what gives the absolute realities their truth and reality. And it is also what gives our soul the power to know this world. So when we are focused upward, that faculty of knowledge, it's not technically in the soul. There's something in the soul that is able to participate in those higher realms, but it is participating in the realm of intellect, which is at the lower end of the upper world. That'll become more clear as we go on. This flow chart is going to get a little more detailed as we go on with subsequent books. But that is what that quote is saying, and that's a good quote to sit with, maybe meditate on it. There's a lot there. It's really densely packed. There's quite a bit to see in it. And now he's going to go one step further. But as for knowledge and truth, even as in our illustration, it is right to deem light and vision sun-like, but never to think that they are the sun. So here, it is right to consider these two, their counterparts, as being like the good or boniform, but to think that either of them is the good is not right. Still higher honor belongs to the possession and habit of the good. So now we're going even a step further. Now this box, I should have mentioned before, represents the realm of all that has some mode of existence. Our physical world has a mode of reality, but it's not reality itself. absolute reality we know is up here. But the good is beyond even reality. The good is the cause of all that exists. As the cause of existence, we technically can't say that it does exist. Yet being the cause, can we say that it doesn't exist? So it's very hard to talk about it at all, and really there is nothing we can say about it. And that is why earlier in the dialogue or in this book, Socrates said, no, I'm not going to talk about the good. Let me talk about other things instead. The sun, I presume you will say, not only furnishes to visibles the power of visibility, but it also provides for their generation and growth and nurture, though it is not itself generation. Of course not. So to break that down, the sun provides the power of visibility, also generation and growth and nurture. It is the cause of those things. In like manner, then, you are to say that the objects of knowledge not only receive from the presence of the good their being known, but their very existence and essence is derived to them from it. Though the good itself is not essence, but still transcends essence in dignity and surpassing power. Okay, it transcends essence. It is beyond essence, beyond existence. So the good is the cause of the power of being known, and also existence and essence in the world of absolute realities. And that brings us to the famous divided line. As you can see from the Stephanus numbers here, it's actually a very short section. Everything that came before it was leading up to this. And so, well, first let me give you this. I forgot. Sorry. So this question here is really what the whole divided line is built on. Would you be willing to say that the division in respect of reality and truth, or the opposite, is expressed by the proportion or analogy? As is the opinable to the knowable, so is the likeness to that of which it is a likeness. Yeah, Socrates loves his analogies, so here's another one. As is the opinable to the knowable, so is the likeness to that of which it is a likeness or model. So this model-copy relationship is what the whole divided line is built on. And so all the metaphysics that we saw up to now, looking at the visible region of the sun and the intelligible reason caused by the good, now we're going to take a look at how to break this down into faculties of the soul. And he says, take these two regions, represent them as it were by a line divided into two unequal sections, and cut each section again in the same ratio. The section that is of the visible and that of the intelligible order. And then as an expression of the ratio of their comparative clearness and obscurity. What you end up with is something like this, where the line is first divided unequally, and then the same ratio divides each of the two sections. So what you end up with is that B and C are the same length. A is the shortest and D is the longest. The length of each section represents the power, if you will, of that faculty. The longer the section, the clearer the vision. The smaller section then is more obscure. And as you read the rest of this section, you will get descriptions of what each of these sections are, A, B, C, and D. Here briefly is what they each represent. So in our physical world, in our visible world, we have only image thinking and belief, because you remember objects of knowledge are only, for Plato and for Socrates, only in the upper world, or in that intelligible region. This is the world of the cave. This is getting out of the cave and then into the upper world. Now what you'll find is that you can make all kinds of analogies with these because of their relationship to one another. You'll see here that understanding and belief are the same length because they function at the same power. Belief can include blind belief, whereas understanding is more logic-based thinking, but still assumptions are at the root of understanding, and that is why they are the same length. So you can make all kinds of analogies. A is to B, C is to D, And you can also go backwards. D is to C as B is to A. That gives you different relationships. We tend to think, for example, that there's this upward growth, that we see things in the world, we experience them, and we form beliefs. And then based on our beliefs, we form understanding. And then based on our understanding, we form knowledge, or this is our launch pad into knowing. That certainly is one way that it functions, but it also functions backwards. To the degree that you're able to experience things in themselves, you'll be able to clarify some of the misunderstandings you may have had in section C. You can clean it up a bit, say, oh, I misunderstood something here or there, and you can make the adjustments as necessary. As your understanding becomes clear, so does your belief system. And as your beliefs become clear, that even affects our way of relating to the world. We do often, this is not like the idea of manifestation. That's a theory that is floating around, that's been around a long time. And I want to clarify, that's not what Plato means here. What he's talking about here, it's more the more obvious way, that the way we understand the world does affect the way we relate to people, are the assumptions that we make in the way that we see the world, what we deem as good or bad or safe or not safe. So we'll see those relationships. You can also make analogies of like A is to C as B is to D. And then you can see what is the relationship of image thinking to understanding, belief to knowing. And the more you work with it, the more you're going to see and the more you're going to understand how this functions. Another way to understand it more deeply, is to get into book 7, where he's going to take this and then say, let me tell you a story to help you better understand it. And that's the allegory of the cave. And that is where we're going next week. So I do hope that you will join me then. As always, I welcome your comments, and also if you have any questions, that maybe longer questions that you want to send to my email address, it is in the description box. I always appreciate a like, and also please consider subscribing, because I do put out a new video each week and you'll get a notification if you subscribe. So anyway, either way, I hope that you will join me next week, and thank you very much.